My name is Eliana Miller. I am 24 years old. Last Tuesday, in a stuffy archive office at our city administration, an elderly clerk named Mr. King slowly set aside my work visa application folder, took off his glasses, and looked at me with a mixture of pity and horror, as if he were staring at a ghost. In the hallway, the city hummed. Cars were parking outside, but he slid a single, yellowed page from a 2002 birth registry book toward me. He pointed a trembling finger at the line with the mother's name and quietly asked, "Miss Miller, are you sure you want this visa approved? Do you even understand who you are?" In that exact moment, my entire past, all 24 years of childhood memories, Sunday dinners, and family holidays, just crumbled into dust. What happened in the next 40 minutes, when I returned home and threw that piece of paper onto the table in front of my mother and my older sister, destroyed our family forever. We will never sit at the same table again, and I doubt they will ever be able to wash away the stain of this lie. But I need you to hear every single second of how we got here, because that archival document was merely the fuse to a bomb that had been hidden in our house for far too long. If you had visited our quiet suburb of Oak Haven in the early 2000s, you would have thought you stepped into a cinematic postcard of the American dream. Clean, pristine asphalt driveways, centuries-old oaks casting sweeping shadows over neat two-story cottages, and perfect lawns that neighbors trimmed every Saturday morning with millimeter precision. Our house on Maple Street was no different from the rest. On the contrary, it was considered a model home. My mother, or rather Julia, as I now call her in my mind, always made sure we looked respectable. For her, that word wasn't just a guideline. It was the ultimate, unbreakable law of the universe to which everything else bowed. What will people say? How do we look from the outside? These invisible questions hung over our living room like a family crest, poisoning every single day. Julia worked as the head of the audit department in the county tax service. A true iron lady on a local scale, whose very name made small business owners turn pale. She always walked around in perfectly pressed pantsuits of dark navy or charcoal, wore modest but stiff heels, and her graying hair was styled into a flawless bob, strand by strand, day after day, year after year. At home, she acted exactly as she did at work, keeping a ruthless, cold inventory of everything. My school grades were inspected with the sickening thoroughness of a tax audit. Clothes were bought strictly on schedule and only in colors Julia deemed fitting for a dignified family. Any display of spontaneous emotion, whether it was laughing too loudly, crying over a scraped knee, or not wanting to finish my oatmeal, was branded as unacceptable self-indulgence and a disgrace to the house. I grew up with a firm, deep-seated belief that I was born very late in her life, practically a miracle. Julia would often sit in her leather armchair in the evenings with a glass of dry white wine, demonstratively rubbing her temples and sighing with a heavy, exhausted gaze fixed on me. "Eliana, you must understand the sheer amount of effort it takes to raise you. I gave birth to you when I was nearly 48 years old. At an age when normal women are already thinking about retirement and babysitting grandchildren, I was forced to buy diapers and lose sleep at night again. My strength is depleted, my health ruined by this late pregnancy. Therefore, you simply have no right to be mediocre. You are obligated to be perfect. Don't you dare disappoint me. I gave you the remaining years of my life." And I tried. God, how I tried to be that perfect porcelain doll. I was quiet, maintained top marks, sat over textbooks for hours, never talked back, and arranged my clothes in the closet strictly by color. But my primary, most brutal censor wasn't even Julia. The living, breathing nightmare of my childhood was Anna, my older sister. Anna was 16 years older than me. When I first crossed the threshold of elementary school as a timid little girl, she was already an adult, incredibly striking, but chillingly distant. She had sharp, marble-carven cheekbones, long, near-black hair that she rarely tied back, and a heavy, piercing stare that could silence anyone brave enough to speak to her. Anna occupied the largest, brightest room on the second floor. Her personal boundaries were sacred, and her word carried a weight in the house that Julia herself constantly validated and enforced. My relationship with Anna was never, not for a single second, sisterly. There wasn't a trace of those warm, late-night secrets under the blanket, shared jokes, borrowing clothes, or mutual support that I heard about with envy from my school friends. Anna treated me like a strict, perpetually irritated stepmother who tolerated the presence of an unwanted child in the house solely out of duty. Every time she appeared in the kitchen or the living room, it began with biting, crushing criticism. "Good Lord, Julia, look at her!" Anna would snap, barely granting me a passing glance as I ate breakfast before school. "She's already 10 years old, and she still doesn't know how to maintain proper posture. Slouching over her plate like a beggar. Aren't you ashamed, Eliana? People see you on the streets. What will the neighbors think looking at this slob?" I would immediately straighten my back in fear, feeling a suffocating wave of resentment rush to my throat, and bury my eyes in my plate, trying to become as invisible as possible. "I'm sorry. I'll fix it, Anna, I promise," I would whisper softly, squeezing the edges of my school skirt in my fists. "I'll fix it," she would mimic in a mocking, timid tone with a disgusted scoff. "You always ruin everything. You cause nothing but chaos and commotion in this house. Mom spends her last, precious strength on you, and you can't even brush your hair properly in the morning. Your hair is always sticking out in all directions like a wild savage." Julia never once took my side in those moments. She would continue drinking her morning black coffee in silence, slightly pursing her thin lips, and merely give a dry nod over her glasses. "Anna is absolutely right, Eliana. Listen to what you're being told. She is older, she sees you from the outside. She only wants what's best for you, and is trying to teach you how to carry yourself so you don't grow up to be the laughingstock of Oak Haven." And I believed them. I sincerely, sacredly believed that Anna was just deeply worried about our family's reputation and Julia's rapidly fading health. It seemed to me that her coldness was just a unique, harsh form of care, and her venomous comments were a way to make me stronger, preparing me for a cruel adult world. But sometimes, in rare moments when the house fell completely silent, I would catch her staring at me. It happened when Julia bought me a new dress for a school dance, or when the principal handed me another certificate of merit at an assembly. Anna would watch me from the corner of the room, and in her eyes, something flickered that had nothing to do with care. It was a dull, heavy, vibrating hatred, a tangible malice that gave me, a little girl, a splitting headache. Back then, I wrote it off as the typical selfishness of an adult daughter who was suddenly getting less maternal attention. Oh, how terribly wrong I was. That hatred had far deeper, more terrifying and rotten roots. It had been festering for years like venom, waiting for its hour to spill out and burn everything to the ground. Years went by, and Oak Haven became less of a safe harbor and more of a gilded cage, with every bar meticulously polished by Julia's hands. I graduated from university with honors, earned a degree in digital marketing, and began looking for a job. I desperately, painfully wanted to break free from this suffocating cocoon of total control and Anna's endless, sophisticated nitpicking. By the age of 32, my older sister still hadn't sorted out her personal life. She wasn't married, didn't have a steady boyfriend, and continued to live with us in the house on Maple Street. Anna worked as a lead analyst at a local commercial bank, becoming more cynical, abrasive, and bitter with each passing year, seemingly making it her life's mission to turn my existence into an endless obstacle course. Any potential suitor of mine was dismissed by her at the doorstep as unworthy of our family name, and any friend I made was declared a fake, shallow fraud. And then, when I turned 24, fate finally threw me a lifeline. A large international agency in Europe approved my resume after 4 grueling rounds of interviews. They offered me a 2-year contract with relocation expenses and medical insurance fully covered. This was my only chance, my legal ticket to freedom. To secure the work visa, I needed to gather a massive, heavy stack of documents. Julia, upon learning of my impending departure, threw a massive family tantrum, accusing me of callous selfishness, coldness, and dark ingratitude. "You are abandoning me, an old, sick woman who gave you her best years, all for a foreign country and flimsy prospects. But for the first time in my life, I showed a backbone they didn't expect. On Tuesday morning, I headed to the local city archive to pick up an official, certified copy of my birth certificate with the state seal, the final document missing from my embassy application. I walked there with a light heart, anticipating how I would be packing my suitcases in a couple of weeks. I didn't know yet that this trip would demolish my life down to its foundations. The Oak Haven City Archive building smelled the same as it always had: old paper, dried ledger glue, dampness, and stagnation. It was a low-slung, two-story gray brick building on the very edge of town, where people came only out of absolute, urgent necessity: to restore land titles, pull old tax records, or, like me, retrieve duplicates of vital documents. An elderly clerk named Mr. King, whose fingers were permanently stained with purple ink from ink pads, spent a long time scrolling through the registry on his ancient, humming computer. The monitor cast a deathly green light onto his wrinkled, tired face. "Let's see. Eliana Miller, May 14th, 2002, he muttered under his breath, drawing in a sharp breath. Strange. Very strange. The system is throwing a verification error code when I try to print the standard form. Wait here, young lady. I need to go down to the basement vault, the restricted records section. The paper ledger books are more reliable than these silicon boxes. Data doesn't just vanish from them." He walked away, his old shoes shuffling loudly against the faded linoleum. I remained sitting on a hard plastic chair, lazily watching dust motes dance in a beam of sunlight piercing through a grimy window. Inside, my heart was singing. The plane tickets to the capital for my final embassy interview were already in my purse. In my mind, I was already decorating my rented apartment in London, picking out furniture colors, and rejoicing that I would never have to listen to Anna's morning lectures again. 15 minutes passed, then 20. A freezing draft wafted from the half-open basement door. Finally, the heavy wooden door creaked open, and Mr. King returned. But his face had changed beyond recognition. The usual sleepy politeness of an old bureaucrat was completely gone. He looked at me as if I had just brought him news of an impending apocalypse. In his hands, he held a thick gray cardboard binder with the glaring label, "Special Registry, Maternity Ward No. 2, Restricted County Records." He sat down at his desk and, with a slow, distinct, painful pop of his knuckles, removed his horn-rimmed glasses and placed them onto the green felt desktop. "Miss Eliana." His voice sounded unusually quiet, almost raspy, as if he were relearning how to speak. "You are Julia Miller's daughter, correct? Our head of the audit department?" "Yes," I smiled warmly, though a sickening, slimy knot of dread tightened in my stomach. "My mother said she registered my birth at this exact branch." "You see." The old man hesitated, glancing anxiously at the closed corridor door, as if fearing that the authoritative Julia would burst in right now and vaporize him with a single look. "Oak Haven is a very small, conservative town. Everyone is out in the open here. Everyone knows each other down to the third generation. And sometimes people do things they think are absolutely necessary to save their honor and standing in society. But the laws of the state archive are absolute. 3 years ago, the digital database introduced cross-verification medical records for all maternity cases in the county. And your mother's data, it categorically does not match the civil registry." "What do you mean, does not match?" I frowned, instinctively leaning forward and clenching my fists. "Is it just a stupid typo in the date or the last name? That happens with old records, doesn't it?" "If it were just a typo, Miss Miller," Mr. King sighed heavily and turned the folder face up toward me. "Look for yourself. Here is the official birth registration form from May 14th, 2002. Weight, height, blood type. And here is the original medical intake card of the expectant mother who was admitted to the emergency room at 3 in the morning with active labor contractions." I looked down at the yellowed piece of paper. The text was written in the sweeping, sloppy handwriting of the on-duty obstetrician. "Patient, Miller A.D., age 16. Diagnosis, active labor at 38 weeks. Complications, early juvenile age, risk of hemorrhage. My index finger pressed against the letter A written in black ink. A. This must be a huge mistake. My mother's name is Julia, with a J. This must be some other branch of the Millers, a coincidence. Eliana, don't delude yourself. You are 24 years old. Look at the truth. The old clerk cut me off gently but firmly, and a deep, genuine pity flashed in his faded eyes. There was only one Miller family with that profile and registration address in our county that year. Look at the next page, tucked under the clip. With numb fingers, I flipped the heavy page. My hands began to shake uncontrollably, and a cold lump formed in my throat. It was an official, notarized waiver of parental rights and a simultaneous application for intra-family adoption. Two signatures stood out vividly on the form. The first was a jagged, looping, still childish and hesitant handwriting of a terrified 16-year-old girl, Anna Miller. The second was the flawless, proud, sweeping signature with the distinct flourish that I had seen thousands of times on my school report cards, permission slips, and college tuition checks. Julia Miller. Your older sister Anna gave birth to you when she was 16. Mr. King delivered the final, merciless blow to my reality. And your mother, that is, your biological grandmother Julia, drew up all the paperwork to make it look like she gave birth herself. In those days, in small provincial hospitals, for a significant sum of money and using Julia's vast connections in the city administration, this could be pulled off without any noise. They just completely scraped off and re-entered the mother's name in the registry to save Julia's career, protect their status, and give Anna a chance to finish her prestigious school without the stigma of being a pregnant teenager. They erased the truth to save the facade. The old plumbing rattled in the hallway. Outside, a car honked cheerfully. The world around me continued to live its usual, trivial life, but my personal world collapsed right there onto the green felt of the desk, burying me beneath tons of archival dust. Anna. My cold, cynical, perpetually dissatisfied, patronizing older sister was my biological mother. A frantic, painful kaleidoscope of memory fragments that I could never explain before spun through my head at terrifying speed. You always ruin my life, Eliana. Because of you, I can't even breathe in this cursed house. Anna had screamed hysterically when she was 19 and I was barely 3, after I accidentally spilled apple juice on her expensive prom dress. You are a walking problem, walking chaos, a punishment for us. She would lecture me every time I grew up and just tried to hug her. All her years of hatred, all her endless, suffocating criticism, her disgusted, repulsed glares. It wasn't sisterly jealousy. It was the deep-seated, festering, unhealed malice of a terrified teenage girl whose youth had been stolen, whose shameful mistake had been wrapped in thick archive paper and forced to live under the same roof with that mistake, pretending to be a strict supervisor. Miss Eliana, are you sure you want this visa approved in its current form? Mr. King's question pulled me back to reality. If I issue you an official extended certificate for the embassy with this hidden data, it will automatically trigger an internal county investigation. The 24-year-old forgery will inevitably come to light. Your grandmother Julia faces, at the very least, a massive public scandal, the stripping of all her departmental privileges, and real legal prosecution despite the years past. The tax service does not forgive its former bosses for things like this. I stared at the yellowed sheet where my destiny had been written by someone else's merciless ink. Just make me a photocopy, I said with dead lips that refused to cooperate, feeling my face turn to stone. Please, just a copy of these 2 pages, from the restricted file. But I do not have the right to issue an official duplicate for the embassy without correcting the registry and notifying the prosecutor's office, the old man sighed, rubbing his forehead. I don't need the duplicate for the visa anymore. I slowly raised my eyes to him, and Mr. King involuntarily flinched back in his chair from how dead, chilling, and empty my gaze had become. I need undeniable proof for our domestic puppet theater to put an end to this overextended play. 10 minutes later, I walked out onto the sun-drenched steps of the archive, clutching a thick, opaque white envelope in my hands. The bright light of Oakhaven felt fake, like glaring spotlights on a theater stage. I walked to my beat-up car, and every step required colossal effort, as if I were relearning how to control my own body. My mother was my grandmother. My sister was my mother. My entire life, every smile, every praise at the holiday table, had been a meticulously rehearsed, filthy lie performed by two women just so neighbors on the street would continue to envy their prosperity and perfection. I started the engine. The car vibrated. I needed to return to the house on Maple Street immediately. The fuse on the infernal machine had been lit by my own hand, and I was going to personally deliver this bomb to our sacred family hearth. The drive from the archive to Maple Street took no more than 10 minutes, but for me, that time stretched into an absolute eternity. I drove the car completely on autopilot, my eyes occasionally darting to the thick white envelope resting on the passenger seat next to me. Inside lay a truth capable of tearing the well-being of our ideal family nest into shreds in a single second. As I pulled into our gravel driveway, the house greeted me with its usual, provocatively flawless appearance. The white curtains on the first-floor windows were neatly tied with lace ribbons, massive clay pots of blooming geraniums lined the porch, and a light wisp of smoke rose from the brick chimney. Julia loved lighting the fireplace in the evenings, even if the weather outside was warm and comfortable. She always claimed that the subtle scent of burning wood created the right, respectable family atmosphere for casual passers-by. I shut off the engine, but made no move to get out of the car. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, deathly pale, with feverishly bright, wild eyes. Could I play my part to the end? Could I suppress the nausea rising to my throat before I brought this card house crashing down on them? I needed to calm down. Take a deep, ragged breath. I grabbed the envelope, hid it at the very bottom of my bag, and stepped out of the car. The moment I crossed the threshold of our home, a heavy, sickly sweet aroma hit my nose. Julia was baking her signature apple pie with cinnamon and vanilla. It was her proven, foolproof weapon for projecting a happy and cozy home to rare guests or neighbors. From the dining room came the quiet, rhythmic clink of expensive porcelain and muffled, lazy voices. "Eliana, is that you?" Julia's dry, ringing voice echoed from the depth of the hallway. "Why so late? Anna and I already sat down for tea. You live in this house like it's a cheap hotel, no respect for the family schedule or my hard work." I slowly walked into the dining room, not even taking off my light jacket. Julia sat at the head of the massive oak table, as always, flawlessly straight, as if she had swallowed a yardstick, wearing her favorite ivory silk blouse. Her graying hair was styled into a neat, stiff twist, not a single strand out of place. Opposite her, lazily stirring her tea with an antique silver spoon, sat Anna. She was still wearing the sharp business suit she wore to the bank, but the top button of her blouse was carelessly undone, and her beautiful face bore its usual, deep-seated fatigue and arrogant dissatisfaction with the entire world. "So, where have you been roaming?" Anna slowly raised her cold brown eyes to me, an immediate spark of her habitual irritation flaring up. "Running around with your stupid papers for that ridiculous overseas move again. Mom's been on her feet all day. Her blood pressure spiked again because of your tantrums, and you didn't even bother to stop by the pharmacy on your way back. Selfish as always, thinking only of yourself. Mom and I have to manage everything in this house while your head is in the clouds." In the past, these unjust, sharp words would have routinely squeezed my heart. I would have rushed to apologize in panic, run to measure Julia's blood pressure, brew her a calming herbal tea, and feel like the worst piece of trash for destroying the health of my beloved mother with my selfish desire to build a career. But right now, something inside me had shattered with a final, definitive snap. I looked Anna dead in the eye and saw no grumpy, strict older sister who wanted what's best for me. I saw a terrified, bitter 32-year-old woman who had given birth to me at 16, callously abandoned me by signing away her rights, and now used every free second of my life to viciously take out her unfulfilled, broken youth on me. "I was at the city archive," I said perfectly calmly, my voice flat as I walked deeper into the dining room and stopped at the edge of the table. "Picking up the extended registry file for the embassy." Julia flinched slightly, and her thin metallic knitting needles froze for a second over the knitting that lay on her lap. But she had practiced hiding her emotions for far too long, so she instantly regained her composure. She raised her heavy, evaluating auditor's gaze to me. "And was that worth being late for our family dinner?" she asked strictly, her lips tightening in disapproval. "I hope you finally got all your papers, and this foolish, drawn-out tantrum about going abroad will end soon. You are 24 years old, Eliana. It's time to finally settle down, find a normal, stable job here in Oakhaven under my supervision, and help the family. I won't live forever. My strength goes into maintaining this house." "Yes, Mom." I intentionally, with a sharp emphasis, highlighted the word Mom with my voice, staring intently, unblinkingly straight into her eyes. "I got even much more than I bargained for. The archive in our town is absolutely spectacular. You know, it stores such amazing, deeply buried stories. Old cabinets hold so many skeletons it makes your head spin." Anna scoffed irritably, with blatant contempt, and demonstratively set her porcelain cup aside. The clink of expensive porcelain against the saucer sounded like a gunshot in the suffocating silence of the dining room. "Spare us your misplaced sarcasm, Eliana. If you have nothing to say other than these pompous absurdities, go to your room, change, and don't ruin our family evening. I already have a splitting headache after a hard day at the bank. The last thing I need is your childish resentment and tantrums. You always act like the center of the universe." "No, Anna, I think I'll stay right here." I slowly took the bag off my shoulder, unzipped the metal fastener with a quiet hiss, and pulled out the thick, heavy white envelope. "I really want us right now, together at this beautiful table, to look at a very interesting document. Mr. King from the archive department asked me to pass a massive greeting to both of you. A special personal greeting to you, Anna. He said he still remembers May of 2002 in perfect, vivid detail, and that emergency night shift in the maternity ward." A suffocating, ringing, almost tangible silence instantly gripped the room. Outside, the wind brushed a handful of dry debris against the window with a quiet rustle, and in the fireplace, an over-dried log popped with a loud crack, throwing out a shower of sparks. Julia slowly, with unnatural grace, laid her knitting on the table over a lace napkin. Her fingers, covered in small age spots, began to tremble visibly and heavily. She looked at the envelope in my hands, then shifted her gaze to Anna, who suddenly began to rapidly lose her usual arrogant, polished complexion right before our eyes. Her cheeks paled to a sickly blue, and the small silver spoon in her hand began to rattle uncontrollably against the rim of her cup, betraying her completely. What kind of stupid, ridiculous joke is this?" Anna's voice became unusually thin and raspy, all its former arrogance and confidence vanishing in a single instant. "What May of 2002? What are you even talking about? Are you losing your mind?" "I'm talking about the truth you buried in the basement." I took a decisive step forward and, with a dull thud, emptied the contents of the envelope right onto the table, over the spotless white tablecloth, right next to the steaming apple pie. The photocopies of the medical forms from the restricted file and the notarized statements fanned out between our cups. "Look at it. I think it's time for both of you to refresh your memories and stop playing this damned puppet theater." With trembling hands, Julia put on the glasses that hung from a gold chain on her chest and pulled the top sheet toward her. The moment her trained eyes fell on Anna's jagged, looping signature in the "Waiver of Parental Rights" column, the older woman's face turned into a gray stone mask, completely devoid of emotion. You weren't supposed to see this," Julia whispered, barely audibly, and for the first time in my conscious life, her voice carried not a strict, unyielding command, but a chilling, primal terror of exposure before the entire town. "It's a mistake. It's just an old, ugly mistake that we buried long ago for your own good." "A mistake?" Bitterly, mockingly laughing, I felt a massive, suffocating lump rise to my throat, but my childhood tears of resentment had already given way to pure, searing, righteous fury. This mistake is me, and you forced me to live in this total, rotten lie for 24 years, making me thank you every single day just for existing in this world. A suffocating, dense silence hung in the dining room of the house on Maple Street, so heavy that the rustle of collapsing embers in the fireplace was distinctly audible. The sweet, cinnamon scent of the apple pie now felt cloying, toxic, inducing nausea. The photocopies of the archival medical documents lay directly on the spotless white tablecloth, rewriting my entire past, turning my childhood memories to ash. Anna sat motionless, as if paralyzed. Her well-manicured, long fingers with their flawless nails gripped the edge of the oak table so tightly her knuckles turned white. Ugly crimson blotches erupted on her pale, gaunt cheeks. She stared at the yellowed forms as if a venomous insect were crawling out of them. How did you even get this?" Her voice, always so confident, cynical, cutting, and haughty, now cracked into a raspy, barely audible whisper. "Julia, you swore to God that all the medical archives of the old closed maternity ward were completely incinerated during the county merger. You promised me that no one would ever find out." She called her by her name. Not Mom, as she had demonstratively and sickeningly done in front of me all these years, staging this endless family play for the neighbors. She called her Julia. That brief, slipped word completely shattered the fake scenery of our domestic theater. Julia slowly, with difficulty, rose from her chair. Her face, usually stern, frozen, and majestic, now distorted into a wild, bubbling, uncontrollable rage. She didn't rush to me with apologies. She didn't burst into tears of shame. She slammed her palm onto the table with all her might, making the porcelain cups and silver utensils rattle. "How dare you!" she shrieked, a screech that broke into ultrasound, echoing through the hallways of the house. "You ungrateful, callous brat! You burst into this house with some filthy archival papers and dare interrogate us? Dare judge us? We saved you! Do you understand that with your stupid, empty head?" "Saved me?" I took a step back, feeling a searing, righteous wave of anger boil inside me, erasing the remnants of fear. "You lied to me for 24 years! You forced me to grow up with a perpetual sense of guilt, to feel like a burden, an extra mouth because of whom Mom was losing her remaining health. And you—" I spun around sharply toward Anna, whose brown eyes widened in terror and wildness. "You tormented me my entire life. You criticized my every step, my every breath, every single thing I wore. You genuinely, deeply hated me." Anna jumped up from her seat so violently she nearly overturned her chair. All her momentary bewilderment and fear vanished in a flash, replaced by a dull, deep-seated, festering malice that she had seemingly bottled up inside for over 20 years, trapped in a cage with her mistake. "Yes, I criticized you. Yes, I hated you!" Her ragged, frantic scream flew into my face. "Did you think it was easy for me? I was 16 years old, Eliana. 16! My friends went to proms, dated guys, left for prestigious colleges, built their destinies. And me? I had to hide my shameful belly in a dismal, pathetic backwater of another state, because my precious mother had a reputation to uphold in Oak Haven. Because in our respectable family, it isn't done to give birth without a husband in the 10th grade. She took 2 heavy steps toward me, breathing heavily and with a wheeze. Her perfect hairstyle finally unraveled, revealing the true, distorted, twisted face of a woman who had lost everything. I returned to this town and was forced day after day, year after year, to watch my own child call another woman mother. Anna continued to scream frantically, spitting and turning hoarse. "You think I was the one stealing your life? It was you, your arrival, that obliterated my youth. You were my personal curse from the first day that damn test showed 2 lines. I had to pretend to be your older sister, tolerate your stupid tantrums, share a roof with you, and act like I gave a damn about your childhood problems. Be grateful that I even allowed you to live nearby and call me sister instead of dumping you in a ditch right after birth. Shut up, Anna. Shut up right now. Stop this flood. Julia tried to scream over her, breathing heavily, turning pale, and clutching at her heart. But the dam holding back the lies of decades had burst, and stopping this torrent of filthy revelations was now impossible. No, let her speak. Let her say everything. I no longer held back my tears. They choked me, burning my cheeks, but I continued to look Anna straight in the eyes, holding her crazed gaze. Now at least I see who you truly are. Not a strict, caring sister. You are just a cowardly, bitter, unfulfilled woman who shifted all responsibility for her mistake onto her mother's shoulders and took it out her entire life on a small child who was never, not for a single second, to blame. And who is my biological father? That same guy who ran away? Was his record erased in the archive too? Anna let out a wild, unnatural, hysterical laugh that sent icy shivers running down my spine. Father? That cowardly scumbag vanished from the city the second he found out about the missed period. But do you know what's funniest, Eliana? What's the most sickening part of your holy tragedy? She leaned forward, a triumph of pure madness gleaming in her eyes. He still sends money, secretly, to Julia's hidden account every single month. All your expensive school textbooks, your designer clothes, your damned college that Julia constantly held over your head in front of the neighbors, every single cent of it was paid for by his guilt and his fear. We spent his handouts to raise you into something respectable so you wouldn't disgrace our facade. So you owe us until the day you die for not dropping you off at a state orphanage for foundlings. Those words hit me in the gut with such force that it stole my breath. Every time Julia sighed over my tuition bills, pursed her lips and said, I am giving you my last cents, Eliana, tearing it away from myself, appreciate it. That too had been a calculated, cynical lie. They were receiving handsome sums from a man they had completely erased from history, and they used those funds as a convenient tool of psychological control over me to keep me on a short leash of eternal debt. I looked at the two of them. They stood in the middle of this flawless, cinnamon-scented dining room, breathing heavily and raggedly, surrounded by the luxury of their multi-year rotten lie. Two strange women who had turned my life into a meticulously rehearsed, cruel theatrical production, just so random passers-by on Maple Street would continue to think our family was a gold standard of well-being. In their eyes, there was not a drop of remorse, not a shred of pain for what they had done to me, only a predatory rage that the obedient porcelain doll had broken out of control, peeked behind the curtains, and seen all the filth. Slowly, making sure not to make any sudden movements, I walked over to the fireplace mantel, where our family photographs stood in perfect order in heavy silver frames. Here I was in first grade, Julia holding my hand tightly. Here we were at a summer picnic in the park, Anna standing slightly apart, her arms arrogantly crossed over her chest. A perfect lie, eternally captured on glossy paper. I picked up the largest, central photograph, our last joint Christmas photo, the three of us smiling against the backdrop of a lavishly decorated tree. With a smooth, precise motion of my hand, I slid the photo out of its silver slots. "What are you doing? Put it back!" Julia snapped, taking a threatening step in my direction and reaching out her trembling fingers. I didn't answer. I simply turned to the fireplace and with a steady hand threw the thick, glossy paper straight into the open, hungry fire. The flames instantly engulfed the edges with a hiss, the paper shriveled, blackened, and our smiling faces turned into a gray, featureless ash in a matter of seconds. "You didn't give me life," I said, and my voice suddenly became completely calm, cold, as if carved from a block of ice. "You just hid your shame at my expense for 24 years. You bought my silence, my obedience, and my youth at the cost of a total deception. But this show is over. The actors can disperse. There are no more spectators." Julia tried to grab the sleeve of my jacket with her bony, trembling fingers, a true terror of exposure dancing in her eyes. "Eliana, stop! You have no right to just leave like this. What will people on the street say if you drive off in the middle of the night after a scandal? How will we explain your sudden departure to the neighbors?" What will I say to the mayor? Even now, when her granddaughter and her daughter stood on the smoking ruins of their shared life, her pathetic, narrow mind was only worried about one thing. What will people say? Tell them the truth, I spat, ripping my sleeve out of her grasp with disgust. If the two of you have even a single drop of courage left. I turned around and, without looking back, walked toward the stairs. I climbed up to my room completely on autopilot, my heart hammering somewhere in my throat. I threw my most essential clothes, original visa documents, and passport into a small suitcase. I didn't care at all about the remaining clothes, the books, the sentimental trinkets, about anything that connected me to this cursed house. 15 minutes later, I was already walking down the stairs. They were still standing in the dining room, and the echoes of their hysterical mutual recriminations reached me. Now that the victim had slipped away, they began to furiously blame each other for what happened. I slammed the heavy oak door of the house on Maple Street behind me with all my might. A deep, stifling night was falling over Oak Haven. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away toward the highway, knowing that under no circumstances in this life would I ever return to this dollhouse of broken mirrors. Long 3 years have passed since that nightmarish night on Maple Street. Sometimes, waking up in the morning in my new, sun-drenched apartment on the other side of the planet, I catch myself thinking that none of this happened to me. That Oak Haven, the house with white curtains, the perpetual smell of cinnamon, and that suffocating scandal were just a drawn-out, realistic nightmare. I successfully obtained my visa, left, and completely rewrote my life from scratch. I built an excellent career at an international digital marketing agency, made loyal friends, met a person who loves the real me, and for the first time in 24 years, finally learned to breathe fully without looking back at other people's opinions. But this triumph did not come easily. I spent the first 6 months in emigration on a qualified psychotherapist's couch, literally gathering the shards of my own shattered self, piece by piece. When your entire life, every childhood memory, every photograph in an album turns out to be a calculated, filthy lie, you stop believing even your own reflection in the mirror. Every kind word from colleagues, every compliment from friends felt like part of some secret conspiracy, a sophisticated trap. It took me months of hard psychological work to simply realize and accept a simple truth. I am me. I am an independent individual, not Anna's shameful mistake, and not a secret project to save Julia's reputation. When I left, I burned all bridges. I blocked their personal numbers, deleted all my profiles on old social networks, changed my email, and strictly forbade the few acquaintances I kept in touch with from ever mentioning my name in conversations with Julia or Anna. I naively thought that Oak Haven was buried forever, but about 6 months ago, my past decided to knock on my closed doors. It caught up with me at the worst possible moment, just when I finally felt absolutely safe. They showed an incredible, terrifying persistence. Somehow, they managed to track down my professional profile on a corporate network, and through it, they obtained my new personal phone number. And then a true hell began. First came a barrage of dry text messages, followed by endless, agonizing late-night phone calls that made my phone vibrate. However, their tone had radically, drastically changed. Gone was the haughty, arrogant, commanding rage with which they had screamed at me in the dining room. Now it was a viscous, slimy, suffocating syrup of fake pity, blatant manipulation, and endless elderly complaints. Julia turned 75. Her iron health, which she was so proud of, abruptly and irreversibly failed. Serious heart problems began, along with suspicions of oncology, and she required expensive medications, caregivers, and regular treatment at a private county clinic. Anna's career at the commercial bank also went down the drain with a crash. After a major internal audit exposed some manipulations with reports, she was politely but firmly asked to leave of her own accord. By her 35 years, my biological mother was left completely at a broken wheel, without a job, without savings, locked in a gradually decaying, repair-needy house on Maple Street alongside the fading Julia. As for those secret monthly transfers from my biological father, which they had hoarded and spent at their own discretion for years, they stopped abruptly and forever. The man simply passed away, taking his guilt to the grave. Anna began sending me long, multi-minute voice messages. Her voice, once icy, arrogant, and flawless, now trembled with suppressed tears and hidden, helpless resentment. "Eliana, you cannot be so monstrously cruel," she rasped into the receiver while I sat in my bright, modern office on the 30th floor. "Yes, we made a mistake. Yes, we lied to you for so many years, but we did it only for you. So you would have a normal, full childhood, so people wouldn't point fingers at you in our school. Julia is aging. She is dying, Eliana. She needs expensive medicine. The clinic is sending massive bills that we have nothing to pay with. You are obligated to help us. You make decent money out there abroad. In the end, blood is thicker than water. We nursed you, raised you, gave you a higher education, and let you into this world. Is your stupid pride really more important than the life of your mother and your grandmother? Fear God, come back, or at least send money to our accounts. We gave you life after all." Every message of hers, every text ended with this pathetic, guilt-tripping phrase. "We gave you life. You are our debtor." But this psychological lever no longer worked. I listened to these recordings on fast forward and clearly understood. They hadn't changed a single bit, not a single millimeter. There was no sincere remorse in their words. They weren't asking for forgiveness for systematically destroying my psyche and lying to my face for 24 years. They didn't regret turning my childhood into an endless hell of nitpicking, coldness, and artificially cultivated guilt. They simply, by force of circumstance, needed an obedient porcelain doll again. A doll that would submissively return to the system, solve their financial troubles, and meekly pay all their bills. They were trying to appeal to a sacred blood debt, even though they had completely devalued and trampled that blood on the very day they forged my documents at the hospital. Yesterday evening, a final, short message from Julia arrived on my phone. She was breathing heavily, with a wheeze into the speaker, and barely audibly whispered, "Daughter, or granddaughter, whichever pleases you now. Our gas was shut off for non-payment. If you don't send a transfer within 3 days, we will simply be evicted from the house into the street for debts. Will you really allow 2 defenseless women to die on the pavement? What will people in town say when they find out what a callous, ungrateful daughter we raised?" Even on the verge of complete poverty, loneliness, and oblivion, Julia, this iron lady from the tax office, was only worried about one thing. What will people say in Oakhaven? I didn't answer. I didn't engage in pointless arguments, didn't try to prove anything, and didn't reproach them in return. I simply silently blocked these new phone numbers as well. This morning, I went to an official mobile retail store, got myself a completely new, clean SIM card using my new work passport, completely deleted my old corporate profile, and definitively erased any digital traces that could connect my current reality with the past. My family remained there forever, in the ashes of the fireplace, along with the burned Christmas photograph. I will never look back. Every perfect facade hides a dark secret. What would you do in her shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe to Storytime Drama, and stay tuned, because our next story will shock you even more. See you soon!